Welcome into OutKick the show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you had an awesome time over the weekend. I hope you had a good end to your gambling football season with some victories in the Super Bowl. We will dive into that and more. The Winter Olympics, a lot of different stories that are going on right now. But let's start with the Super Bowl. On the field, my takes as a general rule, let me hit you with what stood out to me. The New England Patriot offensive line was completely obliterated by the Seattle Seahawks defensive line. Yes, they caught them in blitzes sometimes. Yes, they caught them aware, but oftentimes they lined up with four defensive linemen and they put pressure on Drake May even in that setting. The game itself was won, as it often is, in the trenches, and the Seattle Seahawks defensive line, to me, was the MVP. They all played so well that I understand why you ended up giving the Super Bowl MVP to Kenneth Walker. He had a good game, ran for over 100 yards, made a couple of catches that were significant. But to me, overwhelmingly, this game was won by the Seahawks defensive line. If I had to give an MVP vote, I would have just universally said the Seahawks defensive line are my MVPs. So that's number one take. Number two take, Sam Darnold is an incredibly awesome story for the entirety of the NFL. Comes in as a high draft pick for the Jets, gets humiliated in multiple years with the Jets. The NFL, I think, did him wrong when they allowed audio of him saying he was seeing ghosts out there playing against the New England Patriot defense in a game, which helped to characterize this idea that he just wasn't able to play the position. He goes and he sits on the bench in San Francisco. He doesn't have success in Carolina. He finally has a year of good results in Minnesota, then doesn't play well in the postseason. Everybody says he can't win the big game. The Vikings make the decision to move on from him and decide that they're going to go with their rookie first-round quarterback, J.J. McCarthy. By the way, the only reason Sam Darnold got on the field last year in Minnesota was because J.J. McCarthy had a season-ending injury. The Vikings then decide, you know what, we think we can do better. We're going to J.J. McCarthy. He ends up going to Seattle. Most Seahawks fans, or many of them, thought that the team had downgraded when they let Geno Smith leave and go to the Raiders, and they brought in Sam Darnold. And what does the guy do? He goes out and plays extraordinarily well. And finally, even though it's been 5 or 6 years, goes through the process of redeeming his entire career and fulfilling the promise with which he entered the league many years ago. I think that Sam Darnold is an incredible story. I love the way he addressed it. He was asked about whether he would change anything that had happened in his NFL career, and he said no, because otherwise I wouldn't be where I am right now. I needed to go through that. Love it. This is the lesson ultimately of sports. You're going to get punched in the mouth. You're going to get knocked down. Most people's sports career is going to end in high school. Some people's sports career is going to end before high school. Almost everyone's sports career is going to end in college. But the lessons that you learn from sports are, I believe, incredibly important for success in life. That is, sometimes you try as hard as you possibly can at something and you still lose. How are you going to respond to it? Sam Darnold, 5 years being dragged through the mud, everybody saying he was a bust, no one believing that he was ever going to fulfill the promise that he entered the league with. And now he is a Super Bowl champion. He is deserving of a monstrous contract. Probably, I think he's only 28 if I'm not mistaken, probably has a full runway, if he can stay healthy, of a decade or so where he could continue to progress and become an even bigger and better version of himself than he is now. And the proverbial monkey is off his back because he now has become a Super Bowl champion quarterback. Extraordinary. Fantastic story, and I think emblematic of the kind of story that we want to tell all of our kids to learn from. So to me, that is the essence of the Super Bowl in general. 38-year-old Super Bowl winning head coach. That is a heck of a story for the Seahawks as well. And so there are a lot of positive stories. Jackson Smith and Jigba putting forth what I think is the greatest individual receiving season ever, even though he didn't necessarily have the most dominant Super Bowl. Just so many incredible stories. Mike McDonald, by the way, the coach of the Seahawks, I don't know that I mentioned his name. If he needs a shout-out on this show, not sure that he does. Winning the Super Bowl is pretty good. I think he's getting enough shout-outs everywhere. But just breaking down that in general. Okay, that is my takeaway from the Super Bowl on the field. I thought it was pretty boring, honestly. It was the game that I anticipated seeing. The defense has dominated. But for a late holding call, we would have had the over hit. We hit the under here. I thought the Patriots would cover, but I told you that I thought the Seahawks would win. 24-21 Seahawks was my pick. But the Seahawks defense completely dominated this game. And as a result, it was fairly boring. I thought the commercials were very, very boring. Let me now move off the field to the larger cultural analysis of the game itself. To me, the commercial that was most interesting from a cultural perspective was the Budweiser commercial with the eagle. For those of you who didn't see it, Clydesdale horse, which has been a staple of Budweiser advertising for a long time. Clydesdales, the ones that pull the beer carriage. I don't know when they got introduced, but they've been around for a long time. And in this year's episode, you had a baby bird fall down and basically raise itself riding on the back of the Clydesdale horse. And then the Clydesdale horse is, at some point when it starts to sprint, this baby bird turns out was a bald eagle and has turned into a bald eagle and is fully America F yes as it takes off on the horizon there. Okay, with that in mind, how does this happen? The Bud Light boycott is the most culturally significant boycott in the history of this country. Never before, overnight, Bud Light basically ceased to exist as a cultural brand for heterosexual men in America. Guys just said, I'm not buying it anymore. Brand has still not come back. Budweiser sees that. The Bud Light brand is basically all frat humor now. They try to make people laugh. They've gone back to the 80s and the 90s. They got Peyton Manning, Shane Gillis, whoever else it is. And it's just like, hey, let's try to make people laugh. And still not working. They bought the UFC, all these different places to try to ingratiate themselves back into young male beer drinkers. Now, the challenge also is that in general, kids are consuming less alcohol, which means the overall market spend for the number of beers that you can sell, all that stuff is down, okay? Bud Light has not come back. Budweiser now has said, you know what, we're going to be all in on America. And they would never have made that ad. They're now just trying to be as rip-roaring American as they possibly can. And culturally, it represents a profound swing in the direction of American exceptionalism and the excellence of American life. So that, I thought, was the most impactful from a cultural perspective commercial. Otherwise, commercials have stopped taking risks. In general, they're just kind of boring and bland. You pay $8 to $10 million, and to a large extent, the creatives who are making these commercials are just hoping that people really don't notice. They're just trying to avoid losing their jobs for doing something that is very noteworthy. And it's hard to take big risks that could or could not pan out. It used to be that if you're spending $8 or $10 million, you want people to talk about your ad the next day. Now it feels to me like a lot of creative directors are just making ads so that they still have a job the next day. And that means that the actual swings or the interest level or the entertainment value of many of the commercials has basically vanished. I blame social media to a large extent for that because people don't want to get dogpiled. And so they're like, let's just be blandly inoffensive. By and large, that is the goal. So that's what culturally of the commercial stood out. Let's talk about the halftime show. Now, I said, and I'm going to reiterate it, I'm going to triple down, I'm going to quadruple down, I'm going to quintuple down. The halftime show at the Super Bowl should be in English, period. We have a lot of American artists who speak English that would be very, very proud to be able to have the opportunity to perform at the Super Bowl halftime show. So irrespective of anything else, if I were commissioner of the NFL and people brought artists to me and they said, hey, this guy does the entire singing in Spanish, I would have said no. We're not going to do a huge 120 million plus people watching Super Bowl when the Super Bowl is in Spanish, the halftime show, because huge majorities of people have no idea what's being said. And ultimately, the goal of the Super Bowl halftime show is to reach the largest possible audience. And so I would have said no. I understand why Roger Goodell said yes. It's because ultimately he's just trying to get through the Super Bowl without being a target. He's not dissimilar to the creative directors. And once they present him with a Spanish-speaking option, he's probably terrified that if he says no, it's going to turn into a story and he's going to get called racist. Go on social media right now, people are like, oh, it's racist of Clay Travis. How dare he not support a Spanish artist? I don't think it's racist at all to expect that the largest American cultural event of the year would be done in a language that all of us understand. Let me give you an example. If you said, hey, you know what we really need to do? We need to broadcast the Super Bowl in Spanish. We're going to replace Chris Collinsworth and we're going to replace Mike Tirico. We want to reach everyone. And so the primary broadcast of the Super Bowl will be in Spanish this year. I would say that's really a bad idea because I think you should be able, as the majority of the viewers, to hear the announcer speak in the language in which the game is being played. It wouldn't be racist of me if they said, hey, Chris Collinsworth and Mike Tirico, they're out. We're going to do the primary broadcast on NBC in Spanish this year to honor Puerto Rico's influence on America. I would say that's an awful idea. Similarly, when you're in the Bay Area, which has limited, if any, connection to Puerto Rico whatsoever, it makes zero sense to do a halftime show entirely in Spanish. Particularly because we just had the Super Bowl in Miami like 5 years ago, and Jennifer Lopez, who is Puerto Rican, and Shakira did a Latin-inspired performance at the halftime show in Miami just a few years ago. So the whole Bad Bunny idea, I think, was a bad one, okay? Do the show in Spanish. It also is freighted with politics. As soon as you picked him, given his outspoken attacks on the current government of the United States and on ICE, it is a 100% political decision. So when you say, oh, it's not political, you're making it into something that it isn't, you are lying. Also, and I don't know the answer on this, I have no idea what he said for the entire show. Let me pause. I'll come back to this in a sec. I lived in the Caribbean for multiple years. I love Puerto Rico. I have thought for a long time about buying a home in Puerto Rico. When we lived in the Caribbean, my wife and I would go to San Juan because we wanted to go to the biggest population place in the Caribbean. It was a 30-minute flight. We would go stay in Condado. We would go to the gambling, the casinos there, the El San Juan Casino back in the day. I have spent more time in Puerto Rico probably than 99% of the people that are right now watching this. I love it, okay? I've thought about buying property in Puerto Rico. I may still do it. may still buy a place in the Caribbean one day. But most people don't see the Super Bowl and think we should celebrate in Spanish Puerto Rican culture during the halftime show of the Super Bowl. Similarly, I don't think it would. What's the K-pop? Everybody loves Korean pop right now. K-pop demon hunters, like popular like crazy. I don't think it would be smart to do a halftime show in Korean, even though Korean pop is really, really popular in the United States, because nobody would have any idea what was happening. So my general perspective is, call me racist, call me whatever you want. The halftime show should be in English. Now, I don't have any idea what Bad Bunny said, but I am seeing the sharing of Bad Bunny's lyrics. If they didn't adjust the lyrics in Spanish, and again, I have no idea, then the lyrics that he's saying may well be FCC violations. I cannot, on Clay and Buck every day, we're on 555 stations nationwide, I cannot curse on the radio because of FCC restrictions. If I do it, and if I continue to do it, then iHeart gets fined. You can agree or disagree with FCC restrictions on broadcast, but on public airwaves, you can't curse. I don't know, again, what Bad Bunny said, but if he was cursing in Spanish, then that should be an FCC violation, because you shouldn't be able to curse in Spanish if you can't also curse in English. That's my take on that. We will see whether or not that occurred, because I don't speak Spanish. I have no idea. My suspicion is that surely they were smart enough to change the lyrics so that he wasn't cursing in Spanish. But maybe some of you are Spanish speakers. You know whether or not it actually happened. So that is my take on the Bad Bunny performance writ large. I think the president, you can throw that up, weighed in and had something to say on it as well. And you guys can check that out. That is the president, who really hates the kickoff. That's what I took out of it, is how much he hates and continues to hate everything surrounding the new kickoff rules. Okay. Let's see what we've got. Several different things out there. Olympics. So the Winter Olympics, I think we've got audio. Is this one of the ice skaters, I think? I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't know hardly any of the Olympic athletes in the Winter Olympics except for Lindsey Vonn. I hope she's okay after the fall that she had yesterday. But we have got American and international reporters overwhelmingly asking political questions of our athletes. This is everywhere on the internet. Here is one example. Check it out.
Yeah, it's been a hard time for the community overall under this administration. It isn't the first time that we've had to come together as a community and try and fight for our human rights. And now especially, it's not just affecting the queer community, but many other communities. And I think that we are able to support each other in a way that we didn't have to before, and because of that, it's made us a lot stronger. I hope I can use my platform and my voice throughout these games to try and encourage people to stay strong in these hard times. I know that a lot of people say, you're just an athlete, like stick to your job, shut up about politics, but politics affect us all. It is something that I will not just be quiet about, because it is something that affects us in our everyday lives. So, of course, there are things that I disagree with, but as a community, we are strong and we support each other, and brighter days are ahead of us.
Okay, I don't even know what she means about the gay community is having a hard time. That's just not true. Right now, Scott Bessent, who is the Treasury Secretary, is the highest ranking gay person in a position of prominence in the history of the United States. There are multiple gay people in the cabinet and in high ranking positions of President Trump's administration. It's just not true. Really, we should have pushback here. And the pushback should be, what do you mean specifically? it is true that the Trump administration does not believe, for instance, that children under the age of 18 should be able to have their genitals chopped off. Is that something that this individual believes should be happening? If so, I would like to see a pushback there. So her answer and her argument, which went viral, is simply not true. But what I do think is most interesting about this at the Winter Olympics is this. Questions that are political only happen when Trump is in office. I had Grok look it up. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, no questions of the American athletes that Grok could find for 20 years of a political nature. Trump is in office, and suddenly these reporters show up and they ask hyper-political questions. Why? My argument, and I think it's the only answer, is because the reporters are super left-wing and they want to launder their opinions through the athletes they ask the questions of. In other words, random sports media reporter out there does not actually have an audience that cares at all about what they say. But if they get an athlete, we saw this at the Australian Open too, to say something political, then they get to write an article claiming that athletes are speaking out against Trump and America is so controversial now because of President Trump being in office. Now, I happen to think it was pretty controversial that Joe Biden opened the southern border and let 10 million illegals come into this country during his term in office. Not one question about it from an athlete for the Winter or the Summer Olympics. Overwhelming majorities of Americans disagree with it. No one at the Winter or Summer Olympics said, hey, what do you think about Joe Biden opening the southern border and letting 10 million illegals into the country? Not one question. No one asked about Barack Obama deporting a ton of people. No one asked about Bill Clinton getting a blowjob from an intern and getting impeached. Not one question about any of that. Why? Because this is about narrative. Once you ask the question of all these different athletes, you're going to get answers. And then the narrative becomes, oh, Olympic athletes felt compelled to speak out about what's going on in America. This is how controversial Donald Trump's term in office is. But it's an artificial narrative construct because for 20 years, you didn't ask any Olympic athletes any political questions at all. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, which just happened. Only when Trump is in office are they asking questions of athletes and then turning those athlete answers into the narrative that America's so controversial, everybody has to speak out now. It's just not true. And what we should have is more people than me pointing out how hypocritical and inconsistent the sports media members are being in that they never ask political questions or seek condemnation of any Olympic athletes at all when a Democrat is in office. They only have done it in Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0. Then that allows them to craft a narrative, which probably shows up, if it hasn't already, on the front page of the New York Times. Oh, all of these different athletes are speaking out. And then you write the article, and then the follow-up articles are right-wingers like Clay Travis are upset that all these American Olympians are making political comments and statements. They make it seem like we are the ones who are being controversial and disrespectful, and they are the ones who are just being neutral arbiters. And again, I don't have any problem at all with anyone out there that is in the opinion space saying exactly what they think. I do that every single day. But when you pretend, oh, I'm not a partisan, I'm 100% neutral, and then we go back and look, and you've never actually asked questions of any athletes when Democrats are in office, and then suddenly you show up with an entire notebook full of questions when Republicans are in office, you are not a neutral, unbiased observer reporting on the news. You are an activist who is using your position in sports media to try to influence the larger political ecosystem. Imagine going all the way to Italy, where there are, I think it's fair to say, thousands of competitions. If you count all the trials and all the different parts of getting a medal, right? I think there's probably over 1,000 events. That's my guess. Certainly hundreds, but I bet there's over 1,000 if you count each of these different rounds of all of the different medal-related events. You go all the way to Europe, all the way to Italy, to ask a downhill skier what they think about an immigration policy in the United States. That's not neutral reporting. That's biased reporting, and we know it because the data per Grok reflects that you never did this when anybody else was in office. That is, in fact, the reality. Okay, so on top of that, let me hit you with this. I didn't talk a lot about it, but I was out in California when it happened. The Washington Post basically ended its sports section. Now, I've talked about this before. I went to college in Washington, D.C. I used to buy the Washington Post. I'm like an old man now. I used to buy the Washington Post for $0.25 when I was in college. The newspaper cost $0.25. I couldn't believe how cheap it was. 1997, $0.25 in the dispensary on the street, you could get the Washington Post. That's where I first experienced Tony Kornheiser, Mike Wilbon, who would go on to become stars on Pardon the Interruption, which I believe is still the most watched sports opinion show on television today. So they were super talented guys, funny, both had columns. Kornheiser was doing a radio show. I have said this before, and it is true. Tony Kornheiser was my idol. I looked at Tony Kornheiser and I said, as I started in this career 20 some odd years ago, I want to be good at writing, radio, and TV. I want to be good at all three, multi-platform. I think I have. Whatever you think about me, I don't think there's very many people who've had more success in writing, radio, and TV than me. Each of those is a different discipline. It's lots of fun. By the way, digital didn't really exist, but digital is basically the equivalent of TV now. And I've done all three of those things, and I feel fortunate to have done them. Bought Tony Kornheiser's books back in the day at the Barnes & Noble in Georgetown and read them all. I was a huge fan. He had a style column, humor column, as well as the sports column. Why did the Washington Post lose its way in sports? Because they stopped actually covering sports news and by and large just became a far left-wing identity politics-driven organization. Such that on Super Bowl Sunday, the Washington Post lead story was about Colin Kaepernick. And this was the opening paragraph of the Washington Post on Kaepernick. You can see that graphic right there that I shared. The most relevant figure to Super Bowl 60 is absent from it. I'm reading from the Washington Post. The game will be played in his former home stadium in the place where his protest made him a national lightning rod and a global symbol. The social issues swirling around America's largest sporting spectacle carry distinct echoes of what prompted his actions and what led to his exile, and yet he remains outside the conversation and invisible within the confines of the NFL. Colin Kaepernick, according to the Washington Post, if you wonder how this ceased to be an actual sports section, is the most relevant figure to Super Bowl 60. Whatever you think about Super Bowl 60, Patriots, Seahawks fan, Colin Kaepernick is nowhere near the most relevant figure to Super Bowl 60. Yet the Washington Post, that's basically propaganda designed to divide us. That's what they share. And I do think it's indicative of why they don't exist anymore. What's also indicative of why they don't exist anymore? The Washington Post ripped me for saying Imane Khelif, and I may or may not pronounce his name correct, is a man, and he should not be allowed to compete in the Summer Olympics and win a gold medal. I believe we have a headline. We can throw it up here. Imane Khelif has now acknowledged that he has XY chromosomes. You are a man if you have XY chromosomes. So we got criticized at OutKick. The Washington Post specifically ripped me for talking about this. This is a man who won a women's gold medal in boxing. A man beat up women and got a women's gold medal as a result. Are any of the people out there who drew attention to this in a negative way, attacked people like me for saying, hey, we shouldn't have dudes winning women's gold medals in boxing, are any of them apologizing to their audience for being wrong? Not that I've seen. Not Jamel Hill. Not the super left-wing Dawn Staley, South Carolina women's basketball coach. They actually said it was pure hate, I believe was the phrase, or close to it, that anyone would point out that a man should not be involved in women's sports. Absolutely ridiculous. And there you see Dawn Staley and Jamel Hill. Have they told their audiences anything about the fact that they were wrong and this was untrue and they should have never, ever been involved in this story? They need to pray and be prayed for because the way their lives are set up, pure hatred. Is it pure hatred to believe that a man shouldn't be able to compete in women's sports? I don't think that's pure hatred at all. In fact, I would argue, seems quite hateful to me to allow dudes to beat up chicks and win gold medals as a result. So that is my take there. One more circle back. Turning Point got, I believe at one point, over 6 million viewers on their alternative show at YouTube, their alternative halftime show with Kid Rock. Huge audience. A woman named Danielle Jurinsky shared this story. I run a business, a sports bar, JJ's Place. Yesterday, 80% of the bar wanted the Turning Point halftime show. The rest wanted Bad Bunny. To accommodate, I put the TVs on half and half. The 20%, that is the people who did not want the Turning Point show on, started canceling their orders, taking to social media, calling me a racist, being disrespectful to my staff, and leaving one-star reviews on Google and Yelp. Mind you, the 80% who wanted the Turning Point halftime show weren't happy Bad Bunny stayed on, but they didn't leave a bad review, take to social media, cancel their orders, or disrespect my staff. It's become impossible to run a business. I support 3 generations of my family on a sole income and try to accommodate everyone. The bar business is not what it used to be. Sad day. Turning Point getting 6 million viewers is a crazy huge number. To require everybody to go onto YouTube and watch it there as opposed to being able to change channels is a tremendous success for them. And I give them a great deal of credit. But it is a flaw of the NFL's choice that people would rather go elsewhere rather than watch it in person on this network. Okay, couple of other things. People are upset at OutKick or upset at me. Let me see. Governor Newsom. Hello, California Governor Newsom. He said the very low-rated MAGA blog OutKick run by Tommy, he's trying to do his Trump impersonation, Tommy Toilet Laren, nobody flushes faster, is having a total meltdown because tomorrow we celebrate Bad Bunny Day across California. And it shared a headline, Gavin Newsom named Super Bowl Sunday Bad Bunny Day in latest California humiliation. First of all, Tommy, very talented, does not run OutKick. If you want to come after somebody, you can come after me. But I did say, this is my response. Thanks for reading, Gavin Newsom. You should check us out more often. We're the sports site that doesn't believe boys pretending to be girls should be able to win state championships in California. Most of your constituents agree with us, and they do. Again, I think this is so important, and to me it kind of ties in with the Bad Bunny story. Majorities They try to convince you that things that vast majorities of Americans agree with are actually the minority opinion, and they try and bully you for any other take. Here's another take. I don't know who this guy is, but I'm pretty sure racist Clay Travis shouldn't be speaking for everyone. I loved it. Great to see Bad Bunny tear it up. Great vibe, great message. It's too bad you can't get past your racist beliefs to understand any of it. This is a tweet to me. Whichever individual calls something racist first loses the argument. It's not racist to believe that in the United States, we should have our primary game halftime show in English. And again, if you disagree with me, would it be racist if NBC had decided to put the game broadcast in Spanish, kick Collinsworth and Tirico out, and instead do the broadcast of the game in Spanish to honor Puerto Rico, to honor the Hispanic influence on the game? Would it be racist for me to say, hey, I think they should do the broadcast the game in English since the vast majority of people are watching in English? Of course not. But if your go-to is, oh, that's racist, you've already lost the argument because you're not actually debating on the merits of the broadcast itself or the argument itself. You're going straight to personal attacks. And then I see so many people woke up cheesing. Some of these old people who try to pretend like, oh, I'm going to use lingo. Like, unless you're doing it to be ridiculous. Woke up cheesing knowing somewhere this morning a kid who saw themselves last night is walking into school a little taller. Pride and visibility is a nitrous pack. That's Elle Duncan, who Netflix stupidly hired to be involved in their broadcast. Here's the reality. If your kid is defining his self-worth by what somebody is doing in pop culture, then you've lost as a parent. You failed. If my kids watch something on television and it defines their self-worth, then I have failed as a parent. You have to instill self-worth in your family. And the idea that, oh, well, I get to see, in 1920, maybe that mattered. Look, there are billionaires who are white, Asian, Hispanic, Black in America. Your identity has virtually no impact on your success in America today. That's the reality. People don't want to hear it. If you are using your race, your gender, your ethnicity, your religion as a crutch to explain why you have not succeeded, that's on you, brother. Because never before has there been a country offering greater opportunity for capitalistic success that no one could imagine in the history of the world than the United States. That's the truth. And so if you're sitting around like, oh, I've got to be affirmed by what I see on a show, I think you're totally wrong. And worse than that, I think you're a failed parent. All right. I'm sure there's other people firing away out there. Keep firing. And you can always find me at Clay Travis on Instagram, on Twitter, on all the platforms out there. This has been OutKick the show. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. Thank you all for hanging out, and I hope you enjoyed the Super Bowl and won some money. See you guys.